Hello and welcome to day 13 of A Year with Aquinas, where we are reading his Summa Theologica in 1 year. We are continuing today in the first part, question 16. You can follow along with me on newadvent.org/summa. Question 16. Truth. Article 6. Whether there is only one truth, according to which all things are true. Objection 1. It seems that there is only one truth, according to which all things are true. For according to Augustine, quote, there is nothing greater than the mind of man except God, end quote. Now, truth is greater than the mind of man, otherwise the mind would be the judge of truth. Whereas, in fact, it judges all things according to truth and not according to its own measure. Therefore, God alone is truth. Therefore, there is no other truth but God. Reply to objection 1. The soul does not judge of things according to any kind of truth, but according to the primary truth, inasmuch as it is reflected in the soul, as in a mirror, by reason of the first principles of understanding. It follows, therefore, that the primary truth is greater than the soul, and yet even created truth, which resides in our intellect, is greater than the soul. Not simply, but in a certain degree, insofar as it is perfection, even as science may be said to be greater than the soul. Yet it is true that nothing subsisting is greater than the rational soul, except God. Objection 2. Further, Anselm says that, quote, as is the relation of time to temporal things, so is that of truth to true things, end quote. But there is only one time for all temporal things. Therefore, there is only one truth by which all things are true. Reply to objection 2. The saying of Anselm is correct insofar as all things are said to be true by their relation to the divine intellect. On the contrary, it is written, quote, truths are decayed from among the children of men, end quote. Psalm 11:2. I answer that, in one sense, truth, whereby all things are true, is one, and in another sense, it is not. In proof of which we must consider that when anything is predicated of many things unequivocally, it is found in each of them according to its proper nature, as animal is found in each species of animal. But when anything is predicated of many things analogically, it is found in only one of them according to its proper nature, and from this one the rest are denominated. So healthiness is predicated of animal, of urine, and of medicine, not that health is only in the animal, but from the health of the animal, medicine is called healthy, insofar as it is the cause of health, and urine is called healthy, insofar as it indicates health. And although health is neither in medicine nor in urine, yet in either there is something whereby the one causes and the other indicates health. Now, as we have said in Article 1, that truth resides primarily in the intellect, and secondarily in things, according as they are related to the divine intellect. If therefore we speak of truth as it exists in the intellect, according to the proper nature, then there are many truths in created intellects, and even in one and the same intellect, according to the number of things known. Whence a gloss on Psalm 11:2, quote, truths are decayed from among the children of men, end quote, says, quote, as from one man's face made likeness, many likenesses are reflected in a mirror, so there are many truths reflected from the one divine truth, end quote. But if we speak of truth as it is in things, then all things are true by one primary truth, to which each one is assimilated according to its own entity. And thus, although the essence or forms of many things, let me try that again, and excuse me, and thus, although the essence or forms of many things are many, yet the truth of the divine intellect is one, in conformity to which all things are said to be true. Article 7. Whether created truth is eternal. Objection 1. It seems that created truth is eternal. For Augustine says, quote, nothing is more eternal than the nature of a circle, and that 2 added to 3 makes 5, end quote. But the truth of these is a created truth. Therefore, created truth is eternal. Reply to objection 1. The nature of a circle and the fact that 2 and 3 make 5 have eternity in the mind of God. Objection 2. Further, that which is always is eternal, but universals are everywhere and always. Therefore, they are eternal. So therefore is truth, which is the most universal. Reply to objection 2. That something is always and everywhere can be understood in 2 ways. In one way, as having in itself the power of extension to all time and to all places, as it belongs to God to be everywhere and always. And the other way, as not having in itself determination to any time or any place, as primary matter is said to be one, not because it is one form, but by the absence of all distinguishing form. In this manner, all universals are said to be everywhere and always, insofar as universals are independent of place and time. It does not, however, follow from this that they are eternal, except in an intellect, if one exists, that is eternal. Objection 3. Further, it is always true that what is true in the present was to be in the future. But as the truth of a proposition regarding the present is a created truth, so it is of a proposition regarding the future. Therefore, some created truth is eternal. Reply to objection 3. That which is now was future before it actually was, because it was in its cause that it would be. Hence, if the cause were removed, that things coming to be was not future. But the first cause is alone eternal. Hence, it does not follow that it always was true, Hence, it does not follow that it was always true, and that what it is now would be, except insofar as its future being was in the semi-paternal cause, and God alone is such a cause. Objection 4. Further, all that is without beginning and an end is eternal, but the truths of the inunciables is without beginning and end. For if their truth had a beginning, since it was not before, it was true that was truth, was not, and true, of course, by reason of truth, so that truth was before it began to be. Similarly, if it to be asserted that truth has an end, it follows that after it ceases to be, for it will still be true, and that it will still be true that true is not. Therefore, truth is eternal. Reply to objection 4. Because our intellect is not eternal, neither is the truth of the economical propositions which are formed by us eternal, but it had a beginning in time. Now, before such truth existed, it was not true to say that such a truth did exist, except by reason of the divine intellect, wherein alone truth is eternal. But it is true now to say that that truth did not then exist, and that this is true only by reason of the truth that is now in our intellect, and not by reason of any truth in the things. For this truth is concerning not being, and not being has not truth of itself, but only so far as our intellect apprehends it. Hence, it is true to say that truth did not exist, insofar as we apprehended its not being as preceding its being. On the contrary, God alone is eternal, as was laid down before. I answer that. The truth of the ecuniations is no other than the truth of the intellect, for an ecunation resides in the intellect and in speech. Now, according as it is in the intellect, it has the truth of itself, but according as it is in speech, it is called ecunable truth, according as it signifies the truth of the intellect, not on account of any truth residing in the ecunation, as though in a subject. Thus, urine is called healthy, not from any health within it, but from the health of the animal which indicates it. In a like manner, it has already been said that there are things that are called true from the truth of the intellect. Hence, if no intellect were eternal, no truth would be eternal. Now, because only the divine intellect is eternal, in it alone truth has eternity. Nor does it follow that from this anything else but God is eternal, since the truth of the divine intellect is God himself, as was already shown. Article 8. Whether truth is immutable. Objection 1. It seems that truth is immutable, for Augustine says that, quote, truth and the mind do not rank as equals, otherwise truth would be mutable as the mind is, end quote. Reply to objection 1. Augustine is speaking of the divine truth. That's the plenary objection 1. Now for objection 2. Further, what remains after every change is immutable, as primary matter is unbegotten and incorruptible, since it remains after all generation and corruption. But truth remains after all change, for after every change it is true to say that a thing is or is not. Therefore, truth is immutable. Reply to objection 2. The true and being are convertible terms. Hence, just as being is not generated nor corrupted of itself, but accidentally, insofar as this being or that is corrupted or generated, as is said in physics, so truth does not change, not so that no truth remains, rather so does truth change, not so as that no truth remains, but that truth does not remain, which it was, but because that truth does not remain which was before. Objection 3. Further, if the truth of an echination changes, it changes mostly with the changing of the thing, but it does not thus change. For truth, according to Anselm, quote, is a certain rightness, end quote, insofar as thing answers to that which is in the divine mind concerning it. But this proposition, that, quote, Socrates sits, end quote, receives from the divine mind the signification that Socrates does sit, and it has the same signification even though he does not sit. Therefore, the truth of the proposition in no way changes. Reply to objection 3. A proposition not only has truth, as other things are said to have it, insofar that it is, as they correspond to that which is the design of the divine intellect concerning them, but it is said to have truth in a special way, insofar as it indicates the truth of the intellect, which consists in the conformity of the intellect with a thing. When this disappears, the truth of an opinion changes, and consequently the truth of the proposition. So therefore, this proposition, Socrates sits, is true as long as he is sitting, both with the truth of the thing, insofar as the expression is significant, and with the truth of signification, insofar as it signifies a true opinion. When Socrates rises, the first truth remains, but the second is changed. Objection 4. Further, where there is the same cause, there is the same effect. But the same thing is the cause of truth of the three propositions. Socrates sits, will sit, and sat. Therefore, the truth of each is the same. But one or the other of these must be true. Rather, one or the other of these must be the true one. Therefore, the truth of these propositions remains immutable, and for the same reason that of any other. Reply to objection 4. The sitting of Socrates, which is the cause of the truth of the proposition, Socrates sits, has not the same meaning when Socrates sits, after he sits, and before he sits. Hence, the truth which results varies, and is variously signified by these three propositions concerning the past, present, and future. Thus, it does not follow, though one of these propositions is true, that the truth remains invariable. On the contrary, it is written, quote, truths are decayed from among the children of men, end quote. Again, Psalm 11:2. I answer that truth, properly speaking, resides only in the intellect, as was said before. But things are called true in virtue of the truth residing in an intellect. Hence, the mutability of truth must be regarded from the point of view of the intellect, the truth of which consists in its conformity to the thing understood. Now, this conformity may vary in two ways, even as other likenesses, through change in one of the two extremes. Hence, in one way, truth varies on the part of the intellect from the fact that a change of opinion occurs about a thing which in itself has not changed, and in another way, when a thing is changed but not the opinion. And in either way, there can be a change from true to false. If then there is an intellect wherein there can be no alternation of opinions, in the knowledge of which nothing can escape, and this is immutable truth. Now, such is the divine intellect, as is clear from what has been said before. Hence, the truth of the divine intellect is immutable, but the truth of our intellect is mutable, not because it itself is the subject of change, but insofar as our intellect changes from truth to falsity. For thus forms may be called mutable, whereas the truth of the divine intellect is that according to which natural things are said to be true, and is altogether immutable. Question 17. Falsity. Article 1. Whether falsity exists in things. Objection 1. It appears that falsity does not exist in things. For Augustine says, quote, if the true is that which is, it will be concluded that the false exists nowhere, whatever reason may appear to the contrary. End quote. Reply to objection 1. A thing is compared with the intellect, is said to be true in respect to what it is, and false in respect to what is not. Hence, quote, the true Trajan is a false Hector, end quote, as stated in Soliloquy. As therefore, in things that are found a certain non-being, so in things that are found a certain degree of falseness. Objection 2. Further, false is derived from falere, means to deceive. But things do not deceive, for as Augustine says, they show nothing but their own species. Therefore, false is not found in things. Reply to objection 2. Things do not deceive by their own nature, but by accident, for they give occasion to falsity, by the likeness they bear to things which they are actually not. Objection 3. Further, the true is said to exist in things by conforming to the divine intellect, as stated above. But everything, insofar as it exists, imitates God. Therefore, everything is true without admixture or falsity, and thus nothing is false. Reply to objection 3. Things are said to be false, not as compared to the divine intellect, in which case they would be false simply, but as compared with our intellect, and thus they are false only relatively. To the argument which is urged on the contrary, the likeness or defective representation does not involve the idea of falsity, except insofar as it gives occasion to false opinion. Hence, a thing is not always said to be false, because it resembles another thing, but only when the resemblance is such as naturally to produce a false opinion, not in any one case, but in the majority of instances. On the contrary, Augustine says, quote, every body is a true body and a false unity, for it imitates unity without being united, rather without being unity, end quote. But everything imitates the divine unity, yet falls short of it. Therefore, in all things, falsity exists. I answer that. Since true and false are opposed, and since opposites stand in relation to the same thing, we must needs seek falsity, where primarily we find truth, that is to say, in the intellect. Now, in things, neither truth nor falsity exists except in relation to the intellect. And since everything is denominated simply by what belongs to it per se, but is denominated relatively by what it belongs to accidentally. A thing, indeed, may be called false simply when compared to the intellect on which it depends, and to which it is compared per se, but may be called false relatively as directed to another intellect, to which it is compared accidentally. Now, natural things depend on the divine intellect, as artificial things on the human. Wherefore, Artificial things are said to be false simply and in themselves, insofar as they fall short of the form of the art, whence a craftsman is said to produce a false work if it falls short of the proper operation of his art. In all things that depend on God, falseness cannot be found, insofar as they are compared with the divine intellect, since whatever takes place in things proceeds from the ordinance of that intellect, unless perhaps in the case of voluntary agents only, who have it in their power to withdraw themselves from what is so ordained, wherein consists the evil of sin. Thus sins themselves are called untruths and lies in scriptures, according to the words of the text, quote, "Why do you love what is vain and seek after lying?" End quote. Psalm 4:3. And on the other hand, virtuous deeds are called the truth of life, as being obedient to the divine order of the intellect. Thus it is said, quote, "He that doth truth cometh to the light." End quote. John 3:21. But in relation to our intellect, natural things, which are compared thereto accidentally, can be called false, not simply, but relatively, and that in two ways. In one, according to the thing signified, and thus a thing is said to be false as being signified or represented by word or through false, or though it is represented by word or thought that is false. In this respect, anything can be said to be called false as regards any quality it does not possess, as if we should say that a diameter is false, as if we should say that a diameter is false, consumable thing, as the philosopher says. So too, Augustine says, quote, "The true Trajan is a false Hector," end quote. Even as, on the contrary, anything can be called true in regard to that which is becoming to it. In another way, a thing can be called false by way of cause, and thus a thing is said to be false that naturally begets a false opinion. And whereas it is innate is in us to judge things by external appearances, since our knowledge takes its rise from sense, which principally and naturally deals with external accidents, therefore those external accidents, which resemble things other than themselves, are said to be false with respect to those things. Thus gall is falsely honey, and tin false gold. Regarding this, Augustine says, quote, "We call those things false that appear to apprehension like true," end quote. And as the philosopher says, quote, "Things are called false that are naturally apt to appear as such as they are not, or what they are not." Quote, "In this way, a man is called false as delighting in false opinions or words, and not because he can't invent them, for in this way many wise and learned persons might be called false," as stated in Metaphysics. Article 2. Whether there is any falsity in the senses. Objection 1. It seems that falsity is not in the senses. For Augustine says, quote, if all the bodily senses report as they are if all the bodily senses report as they are affected, I do not know what more we can inquire of them." End quote. Thus it seems that we are not deceived by the senses, and therefore that falsity is not in them. Reply to Objection 1. The affection of the senses is its sensation itself. Hence, from the fact that the senses report as it is affected, it follows that we are not deceived in the judgment by which we judge them, by the judgment by which we judge that we experience sensation. Since, however, sense is sometimes affected erroneously of that subject, it follows that sometimes reports erroneously of that object, and thus we are deceived by sense about the object, but not about the fact of the sensation. Objection 2. Further, the philosopher says that falsity is not proper to the senses, but to the imagination. Reply to Objection 2. Falsity is not to be proper to the sense, since sense is not deceived as it is proper to the object. Hence, in another translation, it is said more plainly, "Sense about its proper object is never false." End quote. Falsity is attributed to the imagination, as it represents the likeness of something even in its absence. Hence, when anyone perceives the likeness of a thing as if it were the thing itself, falsity results from such an apprehension. And for this reason, the philosopher says that shadows, pictures, and dreams are said to be false, inasmuch as they convey the likeness of things that are not present in the substance. Objection 3. Further, in non-complex things there is neither true or false, but in complex things only. But affirmation and negation do not belong to the senses. Therefore, in the senses there is no falsity. Reply to objection 3. This argument proves that false is not in the senses, as in that which knows the true and the false. On the contrary, Augustine says, quote, "It appears that the senses entrap us into error by their deceptive similitudes." End quote. I answer that. Falsity is not to be sought in these senses except as truth is in them. Now, truth is not in them in such a way as that the senses know truth, but insofar as to apprehend sensible things truly, as said above. And this takes place through the senses apprehending things as they are. And hence it happens that falsity exists in the senses through their apprehending or judging things to be otherwise than they really are. The knowledge of things by the senses is in proportion to the existence of their likeness in the senses. And the likeness of a thing can exist in the senses in three ways. In the first way, and primarily and of its own nature, as in the sight there is a likeness of colors and of other sensible objects proper to it. Secondly, of its own nature, though not primarily, as in the sight there is the likeness of a shape, size, and of other sensible objects common to more than one sense. Thirdly, neither primarily nor of its own nature, but accidentally, as in sight there is the likeness of a man, not as a man, but insofar as it is accidentally to the colored object of a man. Senses, then, have no false knowledge about its proper objects, but accidentally and rarely, and then because of some of the unsound organ, it does not receive the sensible from the form rightly. Just as other passive subjects, because of their indisposition, receive defectively the impressions of the agent. Hence, as for instance, it happens that on the account of the unhealthy tongue, sweet seems bitter to a sick person. But as to common objects of the sense, but as to common objects of sense, and actual and accidental objects, even a right disposed mind may have a false judgment, because it is referred to them not directly but accidentally, or as a consequence of being directed to other things. Article 3. Whether falsity is in the intellect. Objection 1. It seems that falsity is not in the intellect. For Augustine says, quote, "Everyone who is deceived understands not that in which he is deceived." End quote. But falsity is said to exist in any knowledge insofar as we are deceived therein. Therefore, falsity does not exist in the intellect. Reply to objection 1. Because the essence of a thing is the proper object of the intellect, we are properly said to understand a thing when we reduce it to its essence, and judge of it thereby, as takes place in demonstrations, in which there is no falsity. In this sense, Augustine's words must be understood, quote, that he who is deceived understands not therein where he is deceived, end quote, and not in the sense that no one is ever deceived in any operation of the intellect. Objection 2. Further, the philosopher says that the intellect is always right. Therefore, there is no falsity in the intellect. Reply to objection 2. The intellect is always right as regards the first principles, since it is not deceived about them for the same reason that it is not deceived about what a thing is. For self-knowing principles are such as they are known, as soon as the terms are understood, from the fact that the predicate is contained in the definition of the subject. On the contrary, it is said in De Anima that, quote, "Where there is composition of objects understood, there is truth and falsehood," end quote. But such composition is in the intellect. Therefore, truth and falsehood exists in the intellect. I answer that. Just as a thing has being by its proper form, so the knowing faculty has knowledge by the likeness of the thing known. Hence, as natural things cannot fall short of being that belongs to them by their form, but they may fall short of accidental or consequential qualities, even as a man may fail to possess 2 feet, but may not fail to be a man. So the faculty of knowing cannot fail in knowledge of the thing with the likeness of which it is informed, but may fail with regard to something consequent upon the form or accident thereto. For it has been said that sight is not deceived in its proper sensible, but about common sensibles that there are consequent to the object, or about accidental objects of the sense. Now, as the sense is directly informed by the likeness of its proper object, so is the intellect by the likeness of the essence of a thing. Hence, the intellect is not deceived about the essence of a thing, as neither the sense about its proper object. But in affirming and denying, the intellect may be deceived by attributing to the thing of which it understands the essence something which is not consequent upon it, or is imposed or supposed to it. For the intellect is in the same position as regards of judging such, and sense is as to judging of common or accidental sensible objects. There is, however, this difference, as before mentioned regarding truth, that falsity can exist in the intellect, not only because the intellect is conscious of that knowledge, as it is conscious of the truth, whereas in sense falsity does not exist as known, as stated above. But because falsity of the intellect is concerned essentially only with the composition of the intellect, falsity also occurs accidentally in the operation of the intellect, whereby it knows the essence of a thing, insofar as composition of the intellect is mixed up in it. This can take place in two ways. In one way, by the intellect applying to one thing the definition proper to another, as that of a circle to a man, wherefore the definition of one thing is false of another. In another way, by composing a definition of parts which are mutually exclusive. For thus the definition is not only false of the thing, but false in itself. A definition such as a reasonable four-footed animal would be of this kind, and the intellect false in making it. For such a statement, as some reasonable four-footed animal, is false in itself. For this reason, the intellect cannot be false in its knowledge of simple essences, but it is either true or understands nothing at all. Article 4. Whether true and false are contraries. Objection 1. It seems that true and false are not contraries, for true and false are opposed as that to which is that, as that which is to that is not. For truth, as Augustine says, is that which is. But that which is and that which is not are not opposed as contraries. Therefore, true and false are not contrary things. Reply to objection 1. What is in things is the truth of the thing, but what is apprehended is the truth of the intellect, wherein truth primarily resides. Hence, the false is that which is not apprehended. To apprehend being and not being implies contrariety, for, as the philosopher proves, the contrary of the statement, God is good, is God is not good. Objection 2. Further, one of the two contraries is not in the other, but falsity is in truth, because as Augustine says, quote, a Trajan would not be a false Hector if he were not a true Trajan, end quote. Therefore, true and false are not contraries. Reply to objection 2. Falsity is not found in the truths which is contrary to it, just as evil is not founded in the good which is contrary to it, but in that which is its proper subject. This happens either because true and good are universals and convertible with being, hence as every privation is founded in a subject, that it is a being, so every evil is founded in some good, and every falsity in some truth. Objection 3. Further, in God there is no contrariety, for, quote, nothing is contrary to the divine substance, end quote, as Augustine says, but falsity is opposed to God, for an idol is called in Scripture a lie, quote, they had laid hold on lying, end quote, Jeremiah 8:5. That is to say, an idol, as a gloss says. Therefore, true and false are not contrary. Reply to objection 3. Because contraries and opposites by way of privation are by nature about one and the same thing, therefore there is nothing contrary to God. considered in himself, either with respect to his goodness or his truth. For in his intellect there can be nothing false. But in our apprehension of him, contraries exists. For the false opinion concerning him is contrary to the truth. So idols are called lies, opposed to the divine and truth, inasmuch as the false opinion concerning them is contrary to the true opinion of the divine unity. Question 18. The life of God. Article 1. Whether life belongs to all natural things. Objection 1. It seems that to live belongs to all natural things. For the philosopher says that, quote, movement is a kind of life possessed by all things existing in nature, end quote. But all natural things participate in movement. Therefore, all natural things take part in life. Reply to objection 1. These words of the philosopher may be understood either of the first movement, namely, that of the celestial bodies, or of the movement in its general sense. In either way is called movement the life, as it were, of natural bodies, speaking by a similitude, and not attributing to them as to their property. The movement of the heavens is in the universe of the corporeal natures as the movement of the heart, whereby life is preserved in animals. Similarly, so every natural movement is in respect to natural things, has a certain similitude to the operation of life. Hence, if the whole corporeal universe were one animal, so that its movement came from an intrinsic moving force, as some have in fact held, in that case, movement would really be the life of all natural bodies. Objection 2. Further, plants are said to be alive inasmuch as they in themselves a principle of movement of growth and decay. But local movement is naturally more perfect than and prior to movement of growth and decay, as the philosopher shows. Since then, all natural bodies have in themselves some principle of local movement, it seems that all natural bodies live. Reply to objection 2. To bodies, whether heavy or light, movement does not belong, except insofar as they are displaced from their natural conditions and are out of their proper place. For when they are in the place that is proper natural to them, then they are at rest. Plants and other living things move with vital movement, in accordance with the disposition of their nature, but not by their approaching thereto or receding from it. And so, as far as they recede from such movement, so far do they recede from their natural disposition. Heavy and light bodies are moved by an extrinsic force, either generating them and giving them force, or removing obstacles from their way. They do not, therefore, move themselves, as living bodies do. Objection 3. Further, amongst natural bodies, the elements are the less perfect, yet life is attributed to them, for we speak, quote, of living waters. Much more, therefore, have other natural bodies life. Reply to objection 3. Waters are called living that have a continuous current, for standing waters that are not connected with a continuing flowing source are called dead, as in cisterns and ponds. This is merely a similitude, inasmuch as the movement they are seen to possess makes them look like as if they were alive. Yet this is not life in them in its real sense, since this movement of theirs is not from themselves, but from the cause that generates them. The same is the case with movement of other heavy and light bodies. On the contrary, Dionysius says that, quote, the last echo of life is heard in the planets, end quote, whereby it is inferred that their life is life in its lowest degree, but inanimate bodies are inferior to plants. Therefore, they have not any life. I answer that. We can gather to what things life belongs and to what things it does not, for such things as manifestly possess life. Now, life manifestly belongs to animals, for it is said in De Vegetab, that in animals life is manifest. We must therefore distinguish life from lifeless things by comparing them to that by reason of which animals are said to be alive, that is, in which life is manifest first and remains last. We say then that an animal belongs to life when it begins to move of itself, and as long as such movement appears in it. So, as long as it is considered to be alive. When it no longer has any movement of itself, but is only moved by another power, then its life is said to have failed, and the animal to be dead, whereby it is clear that those things are properly called living that have movement of some kind, whether it be movement properly so called as the act of an imperfect being, i.e., a thing in potentiality, is called movement, or movement in a more general sense, as when said of the act of a perfect thing, as understanding and feeling are called movement. Accordingly, all things are said to be alive that demonstrate themselves to the movement or operation of any kind, whereas those things cannot by their own nature do so, cannot be called alive, unless by a similitude. Article 2. Whether life is an operation. Objection 1. It seems that life is an operation, for nothing is dividing except into parts of the same genus. But life is divided by certain operations, as is clear from the philosopher, who distinguishes four kinds of life, namely nourishment, sensation, local movement, understanding. Therefore, life is an operation. Reply to objection 1. The philosopher takes to live to mean an operation. Or it would be better to say that sensation and intelligence and the like are sometimes taken for the operations, sometimes for the existence itself of the operator. For he says that to live is to sense or to understand. In other words, to have a natural capable of sensation or understanding. Thus, then, he distinguishes life by the four operations mentioned. For in this lower world there are four kinds of living things. It is the nature of some to be capable of nothing more than taking nourishment, and as a consequence of growing and generating. Others are able, in addition to sense, as we see is in the case of shellfish and other animals without movement. Others have the power of moving from place to place, as perfect animals, such as quadrupeds and birds, and so on. Others, as man, have the higher faculty of understanding. Objection 2. Further, the active life is said to be different from the contemplative, but the contemplative is only distinguished from the active by certain operations. Therefore, life is an operation. Reply to objection 2. By vital operations are meant those whose principles are within the operator, and in the virtue of which the operator produces such operation of itself. It happens that there exists in men not merely such natural principles of certain operations as their natural powers, but something over and above these, such as habits inclining them, like a second nature, to a particular kind of operation, so that the operation becomes the source of pleasures. Thus, by a certain similitude, any kind of work in which a man takes delight, so that his bent is towards it, his time is spent in it, and his whole life ordered with a view to it, is said to be the life of that man. Hence, some are said to lead the life of self-indulgence, others of a virtue. In this way, the contemplative life is distinguished from the active life, and thus to know God is said to be eternal life. Objection 3. Further, to know God is an operation, but this is life, as is clear from the words of John. Now, this is eternal life, that they may know thee, the only true God. End quote. John 18:3. Therefore, life is an operation. Wherefore, the reply to the third objection is clear. On the contrary, the philosopher says, quote, in living things, to live is to be. End quote. I answer that. As is clear from what has been said, our intellect, which takes cognizance from the essence of a thing as its proper object, gains knowledge from the sense of which the proper objects are eternal accidents. Hence, from external appearances, we may come to the knowledge of the essence of things, and because we name a thing in accordance with our knowledge of it, As is clear from what has already been said, so from the external properties, names are often imposed to signify essences. Hence, such names are sometimes taken strictly to denote the essence itself, the signification of which is their proper object, but sometimes, and less strictly, to denote the properties by reason of which they are imposed. And so we see the word body is used to denote a genus of substance from the fact of their possessing three dimensions, that is sometimes taken to denote the dimensions themselves, in which sense body is said to be a species of quantity. The same must be said of life. The name is given from a certain external appearance, namely self-movement, not yet precisely to signify this, but rather a substance to which self-movement and the application of itself to any kind of operation, belonging naturally. To live, accordingly, is nothing else than to exist in this or that nature, and life signifies this, though in the abstract, just as the word running denotes to run in the abstract. Hence, to live is not an accidental but an essential predicate. Sometimes, however, life is used less properly for the operations from which its name is taken. Thus, the philosopher says that to live is principally to sense or to understand. And we will continue tomorrow on Article 3, whether life is properly attributed to God. Well, thank you for joining me. If you made it this far, I congratulate you and thank you for sticking through this episode. And I hope to see you return for tomorrow. And if you found this enjoyable, I would hope that you would feel inclined to share with a friend. And we'll have a blessed day.